Littleton City Planning Commission meeting, a regular meeting. Doreen, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Elrod.
Present.
Commissioner Bockenstead.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Newfinke.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Bagnall.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
I'd like to propose a change, if time allows. I wanted to get an update from you, Linda and Glenn, on your presentation you did to City Council regarding the roles and responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay. Do we want to do that in the report section, or like to as the first item in the reports?
I think so. Sure.
Okay. Any other changes? Seeing none, let's move to the approval of the February 13th, 2012 regular meeting minutes. Any comments?
I move to accept the minutes for February 13th as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned by Steve and seconded by Craig. All those in favor? And the vote is unanimous. And that takes us to scheduled and unscheduled public appearances. Norm?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Norm Brown. I live at 6081 South Spotswood. I think most of you know me. I was serving a year ago. And I won't be long-winded. There's plenty of wind outside. I just came down to thank all of you for being commissioners. You've got some new ones that I didn't serve with, some that are incoming. But I know a little bit about what it takes. And so for each of you, thank you.
Thank you.
I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norm.
Any other? Seeing none, can we move to general business? And the first item on our general business is a code amendment related to the approval authority for the plan development overlay. So, Glenn?
Thank you, Chairman and Planning Commissioners. One thing I failed to mention in the staff report is Council did ask the staff to look at all the different zoning and development codes. It's actually one of the goals that's posted now in the Council chambers. So that's what we've done. And on February 10th, we made a short presentation to the City Council that talked about the way we're going to go about making the amendments to the zoning code. We talked about first looking at roles and the roles of the various boards and commissions, including Planning Commission, Historic Preservation, and the Board of Adjustment. We talked about Historic Preservation. Actually, we're going to have a study session with the Council and the Board tomorrow night, so we're continuing that effort. Board of Adjustment, it was a simple issue that actually the Finance Department took care of, and that was an issue where they were getting appeals on stormwater fees, and they would, if somebody didn't like their fee, they could appeal it to the Board of Adjustment, kind of out of the realm of what you normally do with Board of Adjustment. With Planning Commission, we talked about two things. We want to tighten up the process for making and adopting comprehensive plans, and then the second thing I talked about was a plan development overlay. And right now, as you're aware, there is really a family, I'd call it, of plan developments, and a plan development allows flexibility within the underlying zoning requirements of the code. We have a plan development for commercial development, for residential development, for industrial, and then the overlay district, which pretty much allows some increases in intensity and density in the various residential and commercial land uses. In all those cases, except for the PDO, the process is a zoning process which goes gets a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and final adoption by the City Council by way of ordinance. For some reason, the PDO ordinance begins and ends with the Planning Commission and is actually adopted by resolution. So in order to hit the next thing that we were talking about with code amendments, and that's creating logical, defensible processes, this was something that kind of raised to the top of the list. So that's why we're bringing this forward. Basically, it's to make it consistent with the other planned development districts that we have in the city of Littleton. It's a zoning process, so it should be adopted by ordinance by the legislative authority. We've really gone through the code and tried to revise every section to make it clear and consistent. I guess our one caution is even though we are trying to make the processes logical, this will add time to the PDO process because, and perhaps that's why that was the idea of it just ending with the Planning Commission. This will add the additional time to go to council and get an ordinance adopted. But I think we'll have much more defensible zoning as a product of that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Steve?
What criteria do we use to either accept or recommend against?
It's stated in the code.
50% or something.
You don't know? I'm kidding you.
I think it's section C in the code, is that?
Is it the first one? No, it's
Chapter 9.
It's Chapter 9. Eight, right? That's for the two.
No. We have to have some criteria to either accept or deny this motion. And I don't see anything to tell us what criteria we're using.
Actually, you're making a recommendation, so the actual findings of fact are made by council. That's one of the changes we make in this ordinance. So that would be your guide, is those items that are in. And actually, I believe it's only stated in the TIS section that talks about specific things, specific findings that the council would make. And those would be...
Wait a minute, so we're going to make a recommendation for council based on findings that council hasn't made yet?
We should have some sort of definitive criteria over what we are either accepting or recommending for or against on this.
What are you using right now, Commissioner,
Wait,
with the PDO?
Jan?
let me answer this. In Section 10.9, in Section 10.9.8, the ordinance here specifies that applications for PDO plans are reviewed by the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council as set forth in Sections 10.2.23E4, which that is actually the criteria, that references the criteria that you look at when you're reviewing a PD plan. They have the same criteria. They always have had the same reviewing criteria, and this just cross-references back to the criteria of a PD plan. So you would all be, just as you guys, when you're reviewing a PD plan and a rezoning, you're looking at the same criteria for making your recommendation as the council looks at on those PD plans for approving it. So the PDO process would basically be the same as the PD plan. Is that?
I'm
And
sorry,
you-
what's a PE plan?
The PD plan.
PD plan,
Yeah.
okay.
That answer?
I have a question regarding the process, Glenn. You mentioned that it may add time to the process because council will need to consider it after Planning Commission makes a recommendation. As I understand it right now, the PDO process requires a direct submittal to the Planning Commission, which then it's referred by staff to the DRC, which is a review process that would be taken out. So wouldn't it balance the removing DRC from the process, adding council to the process? Would that balance the time required to?
It's possible. One of the things we point out in the staff report is, for instance, I referenced back to the downtown neighborhood plan, and we identified some goals of trying to streamline the process. Well, one of the things in the code right now is the downtown says if you're in the TIZ, every action goes through a PDO. So that's something we're looking at that in some cases really doesn't make any sense, and it really creates a redundant process. So I think at the end of the day, it won't be a longer process, but we're chipping this off bit by bit, so there may be in the interim an additional 4-week period of time.
I have a couple of questions. So what I'm hearing is that it would no longer go to the DRC for review?
No, I didn't say that. Now, one of the things we are looking at is rethinking the Development Review Committee and how do we do that more efficiently. But that amendment isn't before you yet, but it could very well be in the near future.
And Glenn, can you help me understand your comment that just said that this would in effect become a zoning issue or be part of a zoning process as opposed to the way I've understood the PDO process is it's outside of zoning?
It shouldn't be outside zoning, though.
So you can go outside of the zoning regulations. This is essentially allows us to have more flexibility beyond what zoning is restricting us to.
Right. It allows you the flexibility, but for instance, in the CA district, which is, as you know, most of downtown, right now there's a 40-foot height limit. If anybody wants to go above, they do that through a PDO. So you're setting height limitations, which is really a zoning action.
That's interesting to hear, because when we presented our zoning map, what we heard from staff and from city council was, oh no, you're taking all the height limits off. So it's interesting to hear that perspective on it, because that's what we've had been trying to say for 2 months before that.
Well, again, the downtown neighborhood plan is a policy document. It's not zoning.
Yeah, but the existing zoning says that. What we tried to tell everybody was, if you depend on the CA zoning to think that there's a 40-foot height limit on buildings downtown, you're flat out wrong, because almost all of downtown is within the TIZ. That means a PDO can be applied. It has to be required, and you can put any height on that you want. So there was, in effect, no 40-foot height limit anywhere within the TIZ and downtown. We tried to say that, and we were rebuffed repeatedly by staff and council. It's nice to hear it out, plainly said out in the open now.
Well, I disagree, Commissioner. I'm sorry, I don't think we said that.
Okay, if I have a CA zone, if I have a property in the CA zone downtown right now, what's my height limit?
It's 40 feet.
Okay, but I have to go through a PDO because it's within the TIZ, right?
Correct.
And with a PDO, I can propose a higher limit, right?
Correct.
Okay, so there is no 40-foot limit.
Well, you have to go through a public process in order to get that.
That's not what was said back in November and December. What was said was that our proposed zoning height map was going to limit the areas where buildings could be proposed higher than 40 feet so that there would be an absolute limit. We were told that all we were doing was raising the height limit. In fact, we weren't.
Can Dave,
Never
can we
mind,
stick
doesn't
to
matter.
the ordinance that we have?
Well, this is, because what the point Karina was bringing up was, is a PDO in fact zoning, or is it more comparable to a non-conforming use, to a conditional use, rather than a new zoning? The zoning that's there, that governs the allowed uses in a particular property, and the density in a particular property, is set by zoning. A PDO does not allow those to be changed. So it's not a zoning change. It's no more a zoning change than the conditional uses and the non-conforming uses, which we have authority over. I guess one of the things that bothered me when I read through this was the statement that this is going to provide a coordinated process. Quite frankly, I don't see how this is, especially since you admitted you haven't brought all the pieces together yet. I don't see how this is better coordinating the process than what we have right now.
It's coordinated with the other planned development districts.
The other planned development districts, I, C, and R, which provide certain height limitations and certain setbacks from residential areas which aren't covered in the PDO section of the zoning code. So those protections from surrounding property owners are removed through this newly coordinated process.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Okay. You're saying you're trying to make the PDO process coordinate with the other PDs, which are zonings. PDI, PDR, PDC. All of those have specific height limitations and setback requirements between a particular property that's requesting a PD zoning and surrounding uses. A PDO doesn't. So I'm still struggling to see how this makes it better coordinated, more predictable, more, what was the other word, rational, whatever. I'm missing it somehow.
Well, the PD plans, they set their zoning standards, their setbacks and their building heights. And in the way the code is spelled out, if somebody wants to change those, increase the height or the setback or decrease the setback in a PD zone, they have to go through an amendment process, which is this public hearing process. It's the same process. With the PDO, it's overlaying a traditional zone district that has the height limit and the setback standards and everything. And the PDO allows modifications on those two areas, for instance, through a public hearing process. So it's the same that way. I mean, the PDO, you can't change a use. You can't change any uses from the underlying district. You can't change density. You can't increase the density or the floor area ratios.
I guess I misunderstood. I thought those were the major elements of zoning, was allowed uses, density, that sort of thing. So what we're saying is a PDO can't change any of that, so it's not really zoning. It's a modification to the existing zoning in place.
But it's a tool that's modifying other zoning standards in the zone district, which is your height and your setbacks and open space. So the other zoning standards in that zone district.
So coming back to my original question and having interpreted this discussion, Glenn, what I'm understanding is that the PDO process, even at the city council level where they are approving, is essentially working the same way now that they are going to allow modifications from existing zoning. So it's not, the way I was looking at zoning is you're staying within these regulations. The PDO process will still allow for the variance against zoning for any particular area. Essentially work the same way that it's working now, except the approvals by city council instead of us.
The final approval is. You'll still be making a recommendation versus the final approval. But we haven't changed any other standards in the PDO.
Okay.
Questions, Matt? No. What about the findings of fact would be made by council, but wouldn't we provide that recommendation to the council, and we'd have to base it on the section of the code that actually provides the PD and PDO requirements? So it really is not a changing of the finding of the facts, it's just making that recommendation to city council based on the code that we have to go through. Any other questions? One of the things that I was wondering about is that in the code section 2-9-1, do we also need to delete the PDO as specified in that code section as the power and duties of the Planning Commission?
Yes.
And then, so Dave, I understand that the Planning Commission still has final approval of the conditional uses. So, I mean, that just doesn't change.
No, I realize that, and I wasn't suggesting that I thought this was changing that. What I was suggesting is that the PDO, the overlay, which doesn't change the essential zoning on permitted uses and density, is in fact close, more akin to nonconforming and conditional uses than it is to a wholly new zoning district being declared, which admittedly by city charter and zoning ordinance requires city council action. I was just trying to draw to figure out where the appropriate place for the differentiation was. I just wasn't seeing the logic as presented.
Can I throw something out there? What about just deleting the PDO process altogether?
That's a great idea.
We only talked about that for about a year.
Okay. Another question is, for example, on page 2 of the ordinance, on line 7, we talk about getting rid of listed on the list of merit. And I was just thinking, is there any particular examples of some properties that, that are in a historic district, but they were never on a list of merit? Or will it create an additional burden on some of those property owners in the historic districts that are not on the list of merit? Am I making any sense?
Well, actually, the list of merit is one of the key things that staff and the Planning Commission Council are discussing. Right now, the list of merit is those, I guess, wannabe properties that the Historic Preservation Board would hope, or, with a survey, may become a historic landmark. The only thing in the code that's that legislates what's required with a list of merit is an automatic 30-day wait period for somebody to pull a permit that affects any of those properties. Both council and the Historic Preservation Board and our city attorney is concerned about that, that's a legislative action when it really wasn't intended to be. So the 30-day or the list of merit or both are perhaps going to be going out the window. Now, as I read this section, what's confusing is the code does not require a certificate of appropriateness for any property on the list of merit. It's only when it reaches the landmark status or it's in a historic district. So this section's actually wrong, and it's been wrong for some time. As far as a specific example, the Richard Little House is on the list of merit. And I'm not sure, again, what the question was.
Does it have an impact, would it have an impact based on these changes in this ordinance?
It's really hard to say. If right now, because the Richard Little House is in a TIS, anything they do of a significant nature, which is over 500 square foot addition, would require the PDO. Right now, that's an automatic thing. And it wouldn't necessarily go to the HPB because it's not a landmark at this point. It's just on this list of merit. So that would go directly before the Planning Commission, and then as we propose, formally approved by the City Council.
So it doesn't, because it's in a historic district, it doesn't need to go back to the Historical Preservation Board?
Well, the example I gave you is not in a district, and it's not a landmark, but it's on the list of merit. If it was in a district or was a landmark, yes, it would have to go to the HPB.
Any
Aren't there
other?
just like 3 or 4 on the list of merit in the first place? It's a very small list, isn't it?
No, it's about 28 properties, actually.
I have another comment. It's not evident to me how this is improving the process without the perspective of all of the upcoming changes that you're saying are being evaluated. So when I look at what the goal is for it to be more coordinated, efficient, and relevant, so it's not meeting the criteria of efficient there, I'm not sure how we would define relevant. And coordinated, as you said, was coordinated just to the other PD, but I think what we're trying to achieve through the LU1B is coordinated across all processes, not just the PD. So to me, at least at this juncture, it's really hard to judge that this would improve the process or add any additional value.
Let me just make one comment if I could. It's hard to, you're right, you're not seeing the whole picture of everything being done all at one time. What I will say is the value will be, it will be better zoning, and it'll be more defensible.
Defensible.
Dave?
Linda, you had asked a question about why we don't have, why we didn't schedule a public hearing for this ordinance change. I thought we had with the proposed ordinance change regarding the martial and fine arts conditional use. We didn't have a public hearing on that?
It was on the same place this is on the agenda as business. Now, you did allow public input, and you certainly could tonight. But as Linda asked that question, we went and looked back through the code, and there's really nothing in the code that we could find that says when you're amending the code, it shall be a public hearing with the Planning Commission. It has a lot to do with rezoning. If you're rezoning a property, then it lays out the process and the public hearings. But there's nothing that we could find that speaks specifically to amending the code other than the powers and duties of the Planning Commission, which is you'll review any proposed change.
Including public input if we choose to take it.
Sure. We also did the lighting ordinance. You might remember that. I think we had quite a bit of public input on that.
A little bit.
Sat on the same spot on the agenda as business, not as a public hearing.
Several weeks,
Yeah.
if memory serves.
Craig?
Would you mind just reviewing the process as it would be if this ordinance was passed? As I understand it, then it would still be submitted to Planning Commission, go to DRC review. I was mistaken on that. I thought I read somewhere that DRC would be pulled out of the process. And then it would, and then we would make a recommendation. Would that be a public hearing at the Planning Commission, or is it just a public hearing at the council?
No, it would be a public hearing of both.
Okay.
And actually, council has modified their process as well. So the first and second readings are both public hearings as well. So there'd be a minimum of 3 hearings on a PDO or any rezoning that you would hear.
Okay.
So,
Right now, if we approve a PDO or reject it, where does the property owner go for an appeal on that ruling?
To district court.
Really, not to council?
Yeah. It would go to district court.
Okay. So in that sense, it's not changing by moving the initial approval or rejection from Planning Commission to City Council. The rights of appeal will stay the same.
That's right. Unless, of course, you change. Sorry, rights of appeal if city council doesn't approve it? If city council doesn't approve it, it would go to district court? That's right.
When you look at the whole code and the definitions in the code, it is defined, PDOs are defined as zoning. And if it were a variance or some sort of use situation, it would go to the Board of Adjustment. So although we've done it by resolution, it really is meant to be before council for the first and second reading.
So do we then also have to modify Chapter 9 and where it talks about Chapter 9 and, let's see here, it is I think it's 10-9-8 and 10-9-9, and it goes through the Planning Commission review procedures, the DRC review procedures, and coordination with HPB. And then add a section, this is the Chapter 9 Plan Development Overlay, and it's the it's the fourth page of Chapter 9. Oh, sorry, this might be out of order, but it goes 10-9-8, it looks like A, B, and C.
But that's in different.
That's in your proposed ordinance, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's in the page 2 of 3 on line 29, 33.
Then we're going to want to do some housekeeping on 1098B2. Because it says all applications for PDO approval within a TID shall be referred to the Historic Preservation Board when warranted, with all comments being forwarded to both the Planning Commission and City Council for review at their respective scheduled public hearings. And if we're not doing a public hearing on it, it's wording. I don't think it's anything substantive. I think it's just a question of clearing up the wording.
And do we need to add City Council to that section for review procedures?
It is, as
It's
I'm
in
reading
there.
it.
And City Council.
I think Linda's point is they're not included in with the coordination with HPB. And these are editing issues, not substance.
I don't think that needs to be changed, but we'll take a look at it.
Okay. Any other comments? Now, we don't have to specifically vote on this, do we?
You have to make a recommendation to council.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay.
One more question here, clarification. On the first page of the ordinance draft, under line 35, it says within the T-zone district. Is that the TIS?
It's a separate zoning district, the
Okay.
T district,
Okay.
transition district.
Okay, thank you.
Transitional district has a long, old reference to a PDO requirement in there for
Okay.
non-single-family residential structures.
I see. Thank you.
So what happens on line 19 of the ordinance where we say removing the requirement for review of the application by the Development Review Committee? What happens if City Council decides to go into a different direction? Would we have to bring this ordinance back to us, or?
What page are you on?
The first page of the ordinance.
18 through 20.
So your question is if City Council were to keep the DRC, is that what you mean? Mm-hmm. Well, it just depends. I mean, they could send it back to you for further comment.
Okay, any other?
Wait a minute, I thought your question was, why does it say one of the reasons we're modifying this process is to remove requirement for review by the DRC? Oh, I see. Removing it by omission, by silence. Okay.
Any other questions, concerns,
All right.
comments?
So, reading that again, I'm coming back to my original question and what Craig had said. So, is it still going to go to the DRC or not? So, as I'm reading this, by removing the requirement for review.
Current code refers, the description here refers the process is going to DRC first, and then it goes to Planning Commission. So in anticipating this ordinance that's going to be coming forth here, that dissolves the DRC, basically, we were taking care of that issue in this ordinance as well, in anticipation of this other one that's coming up.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
And it's still, it's just the proposed ordinance that will be coming forward to you here eventually when I get it finished, there won't be the Development Review Committee in that proposed ordinance will be coming to you, but it will still be reviewed by, it'll be a technical staff review. So what you'll be getting is recommendation from Community Development Department staff, not this 4-member committee that's been in place all this time. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Does anybody in the audience like to speak to this? Seeing none. Do we have a suggested motion?
I move that a favorable recommendation be forwarded to City Council concerning the proposed ordinance amending Littleton City Code Title 10, Chapters 1, 2, and 9 related to the process for approval of a planned development overlay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I looked into some other cities, Colorado, nationally, that do have PDOs, and I understand the use of it as a tool for flexibility in planning and zoning. I was specifically looking to see how it was applied by planning commissions and city councils and DRCs and the like. And I found that various cities, including I looked at Fort Collins, I looked at another smaller town in Colorado, and some out of state. They vary. Sometimes the Planning Commission is charged with the final approval on it, and in probably two-thirds of the cases I saw, the City Council or the legislative body was approving a recommendation by Planning Commission. And so, to the extent that it makes the process more defensible and more consistent with other zoning, I don't see any reason to oppose this recommendation, this ordinance change.
Okay, anybody?
My comment to that is we're working under an assumption that hasn't been shared or articulated to us at this point. So for me, it's hard to, I'm all in favor of what we're trying to accomplish. I can't, it's not transparent to me right now with just this one step towards what appears to be a multi-step process or changes that are forthcoming.
I agree with Karina there that, I see where staff and council is wanting to go with this. However, with this being, with the step of not having the DRC going away at the same time, I would have a hard time forwarding a recommendation.
Glenn?
Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, I'd just like to add that, yes, we took out some references to DRC, but we haven't revised the duties of DRC. So in the interim, if somebody did come in, they would go through DRC and they'd go through Planning Commission. I don't think we're changing that rule yet. So the changes actually won't go into, we're just taking out the reference to DRC where it's in this particular code. There's still a whole section that defines the duties of the DRC, one of them being reviewing and making a recommendation on a PDO. That will come to you in the future, but I don't think we're hurting anything by removing the reference to it in the PDO section.
Matt, did you want to? Dave?
Certainly 4 years ago when council looked the other way at Littleton 2030 and asked us to re-examine, reconsider, update the comprehensive plan, one of the things they specifically asked us to address was the TIS and the PDO. Were there things about the PDO ordinance that were working specifically contrary to the intent of the comprehensive plan, and more pointedly, was it causing unnecessary complications in the process? So it's nothing we haven't talked about at length for 4 years, nothing we haven't considered seriously persuading council needed to be seriously rewritten. I'm a little disturbed about the fact that this seems to be relatively incomplete, patchwork, and premature. I'm a little concerned that it takes the process, the perspective added by the more in-depth investigation that a planning commission can take to a particular proposed PDO, and then mix it with the overriding policy or political concerns by City Council. It takes away one facet of that review. Right? I think that's invaluable, and it would be unfortunate to see that be taken away. The problem with making process more important than plan is, and in the name of flexibility, is flexibility when it works for you is great. When it works against you, it's unpredictability, and that's when we hear calls that Littleton is closed to business. So I would, if anything, I had hoped from our downtown research that we'd have ended up with a downtown section of the comprehensive plan that tried to come to grips with the excessive flexibility and unpredictability of the PDO process. Somewhere between the prescriptive characteristics of zoning and the discretionary latitude that's allowed in a PDO, there still have to be limits. Otherwise, a deciding group that this year is stretching the limits or compromising the community's overall goals in favor of business or development, next go around could be operating in the opposite and being more constrained, more confining to proposed development. Seems to me that's where most of us came in 4 years ago, when that sort of excessive flexibility was applied to a process, ignoring what was written in plain language in the comprehensive plan. I just hate to see that go another step back in that direction and see us go full circle. On the other hand, at this point, any council that can ignore the comprehensive plan's plain prohibition against allowing commercial uses to encroach in a neighborhood, both from a community-wide perspective and the particular neighborhood, this is still a reason. And rationalize it by saying, oh, well, we don't see it as commercial, we see it as institutional. Sorry, in my mind, if a business is for private profit, it's a business, it's not an institution. But any council that can make that choice can certainly do whatever they want with the PDO, the powers, authority, and responsibilities of the Planning Commission. I'm going to vote no, realizing it won't make any difference whatsoever.
Kurt, did you?
Well, I think I have some of the same concerns that Karina does. We're approving something that, based on some additional ordinances that may come down the road, and I have a real concern about that. Similar concerns as David. I'm concerned about the political process getting in the way of approving development in the city. So that's my comment.
Anything else? I'm kind of torn because, I hear what everybody's saying, and I do see how it'll make it definitely more defensible and consistent with the zoning regulations, but, maybe we could have an amendment saying that, we can forward our recommendations contingent on the additional ordinances being approved or something like that. Maybe that's...
I'm going to add one thing. I'm personally a little bit upset about the fact that we've been asking for 3 months to have this discussion with City Council. We've been rebuffed, shut out, turned away, ignored.
On the PDO ordinance?
On the whole idea of roles and responsibilities, authority of Planning Commission versus City Council, to have it get thrown at us at the last minute like this with what are obvious holes in it, that really bothers me, personally.
Any other comments? Do we need to make an amendment for the modifying the section 2-9-1?
I'm not sure we were going to make a change. Can you go over that one more time?
It's deleting the reference to the PDO process.
What page?
We will take a look at that. I think
it's,
that particular ordinance is being reviewed also in some changes are being proposed to council. So if it's not in there already, which I think it is, we'll make sure it gets in there.
I have a question. So why are we going through this ordinance by ordinance? Is there a reason why we're just not, you're not presenting to us as a complete project? So why are we taking it piece by piece as opposed to looking at it as an end-to-end?
Well, one of the things in the idea I presented to council was trying to set a priority. This is a big job to go through all these ordinances, and believe me, Jan can give you some horror stories of how DRC is throughout every zoning district. So when we thought about the process that we were asked to undertake, the one thing we looked at is, number one, roles and responsibilities of boards and commissions, and then going into the process, and then going into the further details, more of the quality requirements. For instance, some of the things we talked about in the downtown neighborhood plan. So this fits kind of both. It does, it's the tip of the iceberg as far as changing process, but it's also part of the roles and responsibilities that we say is number one, and we're going to be bringing forward to council. So yes, there's a little bit of a very small leap of faith here. I don't think it's a big one, but that's why you're going to see it in pieces. And believe me, when we get to DRC, you're probably going to see pieces as well, just because of the logistics of the amendment that we're trying to make.
So, but that has implications. I mean, you've said it here that initially, until those other steps happen, this creates more work. So I come back to, I'm not seeing the value until those other steps are completed, so why wouldn't we just go through the process at one time? I mean, we're not gaining anything by approving this now.
Well, again, I disagree. I think you're gaining a great deal, and that's defensible zoning, ultimately.
Okay.
The reason you're seeing this now is because council's going to be reviewing the section that that Linda talked about with the roles and responsibilities of Planning Commission. And I mentioned that a big part of that is going to be defining Planning Commission's role with comprehensive plans, of which, you know, we're right starting that process now. So that kind of raised it to the top of the limit, or the top of the list. The other being the PDO. You don't review the roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission. That's a council action. But this is a zoning ordinance, and that's why you're seeing it. And they'll both be on council at their next regular council meeting, I believe.
And remember, Karina, we're not taking away a major responsibility of the Planning Commission. We're elevating our advisory role.
I will admit I'm not knowledgeable of the fact of this being defensible zoning. So, Linda, can you explain to me why, in your opinion, it does, this change would make it more defensible?
I think I'll look to staff to answer that question.
Because when the city council acts on the PDOs, it's a legislative act, and so it is presumably defensible in that it's done through legislation where citizens are allowed, separate and apart from board members, so I'll get to that next, but citizens are allowed to lobby council for what they believe is the right legislation. We have a new board and commission handbook that really sets apart board members. You, as appointed officials, have a very different role than citizens. So your advisory role in that capacity, you're representatives of the city of Littleton. So it should not be diminished what your role is as an advisory body. So it gives you the opportunity to advise council as representatives of the city of Littleton, and it also allows citizens to then lobby on the legislation that they want, and that makes it more defensible.
And so the discussion we had earlier that the right of appeal goes to district court, so that's where we would be in a position from a city council perspective, that it would be more defensible because it was I think you called it a legislative act.
That's right.
Thank you.
And I just want to validate that some of the concerns we've expressed today are going to be in the staff report presented to council. Okay. Any other comments?
I do. I'm sorry, I have another one. Do we have any history, or can you give us a sense of how many appeals actually went to district court from decisions made by the Planning Commission?
I don't have that information, but we can maybe look. I don't know if Jan. Do you? I know I can think of a couple of cases, but I don't know how many.
Well, in the 22 years I've been here, I don't think there has been one, actually.
One, you said?
There hasn't been any.
Any.
I mean, the cases I was involved in all had to do with a council decision. And frankly, we didn't have, prior to the creation of the TIS, we didn't have a lot of plan development overlays because, you know, they were used, and we have them approved out throughout the city in different cases, but they were used at that time mostly for, you know, properties that had like drainage issues or whatever, and they needed, or terrain issues, and they were asking for like, you know, smaller sized lots for part of the subdivision. That's when PD overlays were used mostly back then until the TIS, and then the TIS came, and, you know, the PDO is basically used as a tool to get to review development downtown in a public hearing process. So I'm not.
You can't think of anything.
We can look
Yeah,
at
I'm
that.
not aware. I don't, in the 22 years I've been here, I don't believe that the Planning Commission's actions have ever been taken to court like that, but they have probably prior to my existence here. So.
Dave?
So, Jan, for 22 years plus or minus, the only issues that have gone to district court have been based on actions by city council. Actions by planning commission, which are based on findings of fact and an application of the existing zoning and comprehensive plan rather than legislative or political decisions, haven't been taken to district court. So now what we're talking about with this process is bumping these kinds of decisions to city council, which is going to increase the likelihood of something going to district court.
Well, I wouldn't say it would increase the likelihood of going
Well,
to
it doesn't
district court.
decrease
It's just
it.
that if it, well, in the time I've been here, I haven't seen a conditional use, a decision on a conditional use be contested in district court. I have not seen, you know, a special exception permit for floodplain be contested in district court, or a PD overlay that was approved by Planning Commission contested in district court. I have seen rezonings that council has approved or disapproved get contested in district court. But
And I guess that's my point. By elevating the PDO process, which Planning Commission would handle as a reading of the zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan, and moving it up to City Council as a zoning issue, you are getting it into a zoning or rezoning situation that in the past is the only thing that's led to taking cases to district court. It sounds like increased risk to me.
Yeah, I don't know if you can make that leap. I mean, we would have to look at what cases we have. I just think it would be very difficult to make the leap that because council's going to do it, it's going to heighten the risk.
And, Kristen, I was trying to draw the distinction between legislative acts, which are subject to lobbying, which can lead to, wait a minute, claims of, wait a minute, you didn't treat us fairly, we're going to take it to district court, as opposed to application of existing written rules in zoning and the comprehensive plan made by the Planning Commission that are less likely to be subject to claims of, you know, lobbying, pressure, prejudice, that sort of thing. That's the distinction I was trying to draw.
Okay.
Well, and one of the things that I've heard for years and years is that City Council definitely wanted to take this, add this additional layer onto the PDO process. So it's something I've heard for years and years. So we ready to vote?
Question?
Okay. So all those in favor? 3-4, 4 against.
Okay, it fails.
That takes us to the ordinance of the City of Littleton amending City Code Section 10-4-4B 2-5 pertaining to the maximum numbers of chicken hens permitted in the R1, the R2, the R3, and the RE zone districts.
Good evening, Council. Ernie Rose, Senior Planner, Community Development Department. Oh, Planning Commission. Sorry, I'm a step ahead.
For elevating us a little higher.
Temporarily.
I'm here to present the ordinance amending Littleton Code Section 10-4B 2.5 related to the maximum number of chickens allowed in the residential zone districts R1, R2, R3, and RE. The proposed ordinance will increase the maximum number of chicken hens from 4 to 6. The original ordinance was adopted in 2010, and it included other restrictions pertaining to the minimum size of the chicken house, the outdoor enclosure, maximum setback from property lines, prohibitions against keeping roosters and killing of hens on site, and there was control of odor, dust, and waste. This ordinance was requested by council after receiving a number of inquiries proposing an increase to the maximum number of chicken hens permitted. Staff also had received a number of inquiries about increasing those numbers, and those inquiries were based on the fact of increasing the production of eggs. 6 chickens will allow for more eggs. We went back and contacted the jurisdictions we contacted during the original ordinance. Everything was the same, except the city of Centennial now allows 4 adult pets, and of those 4, they could be all chickens. And Denver now allows 8 chickens. So our ordinance at 6 is kind of a middle number from the research we've done. It's kind of in the middle of everything. When the original ordinance was adopted, there were concerns we would get complaints about odor and noise, and staff has not received those type of complaints. The inquiries we have received have been questions about, does a particular property meet the requirements of the code? And in most cases they have. They just were looking to find that answer. With that, staff recommends approval of the ordinance, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Craig?
What is the minimum lot size in those 4 districts that are identified there? Do you know offhand?
R1, I think, is half acre, and R2 is 9,000, and then R3 is 6,500.
I'm sorry, what was R1?
Half acre.
Steve?
Since the ordinance was brought up in 2010, how many people have gotten the permits or in the city?
Well, a permit's not required. We didn't require you to get a permit to get it. I don't think we've had an overabundance of complaints or anything about them.
Is there any idea on how many citizens have taken advantage of that ordinance and have gotten chickens?
I know 3 in my neighborhood.
I think there's a lot more. I mean, they don't have to check with us, so it's hard to tell, but I think it has been positive, and the increase to 6 isn't going to impact that make that much difference as long as they're protected and everything. So.
Dave?
So, Ernie, other than Lakewood, none of the other jurisdictions, none of the other municipalities have established any maximum number per a given size of lot?
No. If you look at the Greenwood Village one, I believe it was, or there's one in here that reads that it's in the 50 square feet per animal is required. Yeah, Greenwood Village.
But Lakewood's the only one that said, oh, okay, they restrict it to residential not lots. They don't prorate it in any way or shape.
Yes.
Okay. But we're talking about doing it on lots that are considerably smaller than that?
9,000.
R3 is the smallest,
6,500.
6,500.
How many R1?
R1 is half acre.
How many properties in R1? How many properties in the metro? in the city have an R1 zoning?
I couldn't tell you that.
A lot.
The R3, Kurt, that is the 6,500 square foot. Is that what you're?
I'm just thinking.
R3 is probably the biggest, I would guess.
Larger.
Oh, I see.
Most of the properties will be 6,000 to 9,000 square feet. And I have a fairly large lot for the city, and it's 9,600 square feet. I think most of them will be on much smaller lots.
What's a third of an acre? What is that equivalent to? That's all I have a reference in my mind.
Third of an acre?
What is that equivalent to? 9,000,
What do you
10,000?
know? It's 14,000. Somebody going to do a quick
12
math for me?
something?
14,000
12,500?
something? Yeah.
Third, fourth. Yeah, it's
I think what we're getting at is probability of nuisance. And I think if I recall our discussion, was a year and a half ago when we did this, we really pretty much came to the conclusion that there are other portions of the city ordinance that would govern nuisance problems, that sort of thing, and we could depend on that instead of worrying about specific, more complexities of more requirements on square footages, number of chickens, that sort of thing.
Right.
What would happen, or what would the process be if we do start receiving complaints? Could we change this again to 4? What would that process look like?
It would be the same as this. You'd be asking for a decrease in the number
Because of complaints.
of complaints. We haven't received the complaints about somebody having too many birds. We have heard rumors that you had to buy 6 at a time, that you couldn't get 4 birds, but we dispelled that after contacting a supplier of them. They try to sell them in pairs, but they will sell them one by one if you can say that if you have other chickens, but they don't like selling them by themselves. But we haven't had a complaint, just that the complaints or the inquiries have been about, does that site meet the requirements of the code, and all of them.
Bernie, is there a maximum number of pets per
3.
household?
3.
Total pets?
These aren't pets, though.
But these are not considered
This
pets.
was taken
So
out of
someone
the-
could have 3 dogs and 6 chickens?
Yeah, 6 chickens
If
with
we
this
pass this.
ordinance, yes. So you could
How
have,
many inquiries has the city staff received? I'm kind of concerned that this was only brought up by like maybe 1 or 2 people, and that it just, maybe we're jumping the gun on this.
I don't know the number. I know our zoning official has received calls, and she gets calls all the time. I don't know if she has a set number of that, but it has been more than just one person. There has been calls for more.
What's the penalty for having more than 4 right now?
You'd get a violation. There'd be a fine if you pushed it to that point. You could easily get rid of anyone.
And give the city official a chicken dinner.
Right. Well, you can't do that on site. You'd have to take the chicken somewhere else.
Any big, no? I emailed a couple people who have chickens, and I was kind of wanted to see what they thought. And one person said that 8 is a better number, and if you had chickens on a larger lot, it's not saying that I'm agreeing with it, but he suggested 6 chickens anywhere and 8 to 12 on lots of an acre or more, and provide no limits on larger lots or lots larger than 2 acres, as long as the setback requirements are met and the other requirements by the code. So that was a.
Well, I think you could have as many as you wanted on a larger lot right now. Anything over RE, because it's kind of an agricultural zone district.
I mean, we could play this game forever. I mean, is 4 enough chickens to have eggs every morning for my wife and me? Absolutely. Is it enough for my son with 3 growing girls? Probably not. So is 6 going to be enough? Yeah, except on the days when the chickens don't all lay eggs. And so then do we go to 8? And in the meantime, at what point do the neighbors start deciding, okay, 4 wasn't too bad, we could live with that. 8? 6? 10? Where's it going to go? To a certain extent, it's arbitrary.
Well, if we're discussing, if you've got 4 and they're laying 1 a day, you've got 28 eggs, you get 2 dozen a week. not too many people are using 2 dozen eggs a week. You've got 120 eggs a month. I don't know how many are using 120 eggs a month. I was against the original ordinance. I'm still against it, and I will be against this one, raising the number of chickens. I think you've got a number of communities in the area that don't allow them, period. They allow them on larger lots, and I think we're going to see them mostly on small city lots of 6,000 square feet or less. They're going to be very close to the, obviously there's setbacks, but they're going to still be very close to your neighbor either way. If it was a half-acre lot of 25,000 square feet or greater, then I think that it could make some sense. If we were going to approve it, I would put an amendment on there that it be at least a half-acre lot before we move forward on that.
I disagreed with you the last time, but I think I'm going to side with you on this one.
Should I voice my comments now, or should I wait until?
Sure.
Okay. Actually, I know 3 families that do have chickens, and they and in particular one family, they have 5 of their children at home, and they also have another one of their children with her husband and another child. And so I've seen that families that having 4 chickens is not enough, and they're actually and being around some of the families, the chickens are very friendly. I mean, they're actually, I think, more enjoyable to be around than perhaps even a dog. They're not noisy. And so I've actually found that the chickens to be, I think, fine for even a smaller lot. And as a family of 4, our family, we do go through 2 dozen eggs. And so I can see the need of why to have more than 4 chickens. Also, in the wintertime, the egg production goes down, so that you might get 1 egg a day per chicken, or you might not. So by having more chickens, you will have a likelihood of having more eggs during those cooler months. So I'm very much in favor of this, and I will vote for it.
Okay, Dave?
My name is not Mitt Romney, but I may waffle here a bit. I mean, what we're really dealing with here is zoning as a means of assuring that people can get reasonable benefit from their property, versus zoning as a protection against people who don't want to have their rights of enjoyment infringed upon by something obnoxious that's going on next door. So my question is, Ernie, whether we allow 4, 6, 8, or whatever, if the city gets a complaint that the chickens are too noisy, smelly, whatever, how do you deal with that? How do you go in and say, yeah, that's a little too smelly, yeah, that's a little too noisy? Where's the defensible judgment call in a case like that?
Well, you have to verify that the complaint is accurate, so somehow you'd have to smell the odor, or sometimes it'll be a neighbor that complains that will allow you in the yard, and you can look over or you can smell. We haven't had those complaints. We have had people let us in, or code compliance department in yards, to look at a chicken enclosure to make sure it was in compliance, but it hasn't been related to odor, noise.
Okay, but it comes down to a reasonably subjective difference of opinion between the chicken owner, the complaining neighbor, and whoever goes out there from the city to evaluate the situation.
Right.
Okay.
Coming back to my comment earlier, if you do receive complaints, it's not as easy of a process as this is, because if you receive complaints, then it becomes an evaluation. You have to justify that the complaint is accurate, that it is, smelly or dusty or whatever. So right now we're adding additional rights to the current ordinance. I think if the situation was to reverse itself, we're eliminating the rights from a property owner, that would probably be more difficult, would it not?
Yeah, I would think so. The deal with, though, a code violation, when it is identified, say it is smelly or whatever, you are given a notice to correct it. So you're given 10 days to correct it. It's not a ticket that you go to court right on. We give you time to correct it. So it'd be as easy as cleaning the site up if you haven't had too many chickens, getting rid of 2 or whatever, and then you'd come back and verify it. So I think it would be tough just to get support to move back, but and I guess you could try it, but I'm not sure that would work once you've established the number.
Yeah, I used to own lots of chickens, 20-some, or used to care for them. They can make a lot of noise, but the noise levels between 4 and 6 are not going to be very great. When the initial ordinance went out, we did have the minimum 2 square feet per bird on inside, and then minimum of 10 square feet per bird on the outside. So, I mean, if we're going to the space for the enclosure is going to have to be larger for the more birds, because it's per bird.
Right. So you can increase that because you're allowed more birds, so you can make the enclosure bigger.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with raising it from 4 to 6 for that reason.
Any other comments?
It's a tough one. I mean, if there were some way of measuring smell, it would be easier. If there's some way of weighing, of objectively weighing someone's right to an enjoyable use of their own property versus a neighbor's right to enjoyable use without the odor and the noise, it would be nice, but there is no objective measure. We're going to have to make a guess, educated guess.
And really, the comment of noise also comes into play whether you're talking about dogs or any other animal, so it's subjective all the way around.
In some ways, it may come down to, no, that's a subjective opinion. I shouldn't say that. It may come down to how the community feels about the whole locavore issue. Is it trendy or is it looking ahead? Don't know.
Steve, I have a question for you. Is the noise bad between 4 in the morning and 6 in the morning? Or when is it the worst?
When they're being fed.
When they're laying the eggs.
Okay.
Whenever that happens to be, and that can be any time during the day. And chickens are a very social bird, and they'll chat with each other, little, you know.
I'm sorry, what would they do?
So do we have any other discussion, or do we have a motion?
I have a motion. I move that a favorable recommendation be forwarded to City Council concerning the proposed ordinance amending City Code Section 10-4-4, B 2.5, pertaining to the maximum number of chicken hens permitted in the R1, R2, R3, and RE zone districts.
Second that.
Okay. We ready to vote? Any other comments? Anybody in the audience like to comment before we vote? All right. All those in favor? So it's 4, and 3 against. The motion carries. Do you want me to leave it? Hold on. Okay. All right, that takes us to public hearings, and there are none. And so then our next item on the agenda is an update on the presentation to City Council last Tuesday. I don't know if you want to...
I didn't know about it till last Tuesday, so I'll let you take it from there.
Well, we gave the presentation, and I have not heard any comments or feedback or next steps or general direction, and that's about all I know. So I don't know if anybody else has heard anything, or...
Glenn, what could we expect from that? Could we expect some kind of a response, or...
I think it was actually, you did a call to public, which typically council won't respond. Sometimes they'll give direction to staff. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if staff has. I really don't know how to answer that question.
What other opportunity do we have to present that information to council? What other avenues do we have to do that? If it's a study session, like is being done with, I think you said, the HPB board, is that something that we can bring to the table and ask if they'd be willing to go through a study session with us?
Sure. In fact, well, Kirsten mentioned they are rewriting the handbook for boards and commissions. I mean, I was just looking at the old one today, and it actually says, and I'll watching her reaction, but it does say that commissioners can contact their council members and bring up issues, and council sets the agenda for their meetings. So that's how that would have to happen.
So is that just an email to council saying, can we discuss this?
Well, I think what we're doing right now, so the council has set up a task force. I don't know if Glenn has talked to you all about the board and commission task force. So that's really what, as part of their goals, they did to take a comprehensive look at why some boards, what their authority is, do we need them, because it hasn't been looked at. And a lot of communities will have just standing boards and then boards that are ad hoc or on a temporary basis. So they're looking at the whole thing comprehensively, finding out, what is the purpose, what are the authorities, and what hasn't been looked at for a long time is what they want to delegate, because really everything, the authority belongs to council, and they decide whether they delegate it. That's per our city charter. So in the handbook, we talk about using your council liaison. Now, you probably won't have one for planning commission, but you certainly can have your chair contact the city manager and say, we'd like to have this study session for this reason. But typically it's going to be council directing the appointees, you as board members, as to what they want to see you doing. So it's going to be coming from the top down. But there's no reason that the chair can't be in touch with the city manager and ask that something get put on the agenda, such as a study session.
We've actually voted as a commission to ask city council to get on their agenda. And I think we assumed that it would be staff that took that through to city council. But
we had also talked about taking time at one of these meetings, regular meeting, other business permitting, study session if not, of trying to come to a consensus on our own of what the major issues, principles, points, whatever, that ought to be resolved between council staff and the planning commission. We've not yet had that opportunity. So in an exchange of emails back and forth, I fine-tuned, and Steve, I'm not going to read this, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to read it, but I am going to hand it out. That's a starting point, I'd like to think, on major things that ought to be talked about. Obviously biased because I'm the one that wrote it. But I'd like us, if the rest of the commissioners are willing, to put a little time into reading that and making a decision. Do we want to, oh, sorry, I've got one for you too, Glenn. Do we want to present some sort of modification of that, simplified, toned down, amplified, whatever, to council saying these are the things that are of concern to us about process, the rules, responsibilities? Can we sit down and talk about it? So I'm asking that the rest of the commission read through that and come back at the next meeting, if you're willing to, and propose that we discuss it with an eye on sending it to City Council expressing our concerns.
Dave, you're giving me homework when I was supposed to be done today.
You still have 5 more days.
I guess that's true. I guess I haven't formally appointed the new commissioners.
And it can be something as casual as, I've handed it out. If somebody sees something in there as a reason for pursuing this, trying to reach consensus, then fine, bring it up at the next meeting, and we'll talk about it. If not, if I'm the lone voice crying out in the wilderness, then it's gone.
Tell me again, how should we look at this compared to what we propose as roles and responsibilities? Is this intended to be more comprehensive, so outside of the comp plan? And
I'm trying to take a higher level look at it, not worrying about the details of roles and responsibilities. Quite frankly, I don't care. I don't care who makes what decision. I'm more concerned about the transparency, the predictability, the objectivity of the rules that are being applied. We went through a process more than 5 years ago where the rules were set aside. Guess what? The community ended up telling the staff and community, and the Planning Commission, as I recall, we don't care what you've done to set aside the rules. We want you to follow the rules. I'd hate to see that happen again. The claims we got at the time, again, were that Littleton was closed to business. There's a difference between being closed to business because you don't set reasonable vision and goals and rules to follow in accommodating change, and the kind of flexibility that adds to the unpredictability that being closed to business implies. And I'd hate to see the clock go full circle back to 5 or 6 years ago.
Let me ask staff this. Do you know if City Council, I emailed the presentation that we did to Wendy. Do you know if she sent it out to City Council?
Well, it's part of the minutes, and so it would be before council when they approve the minutes.
Okay. Any other comments?
Linda, my thoughts on this are, I think what we're trying to accomplish is that City Council sees our proposal, or the task force sees our proposal and considers it. I mean, the purpose of a task force is to truly evaluate different things, whether it's a proposal from Planning Commission, which should have some weight given the experience, and other things. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that it has to be a study session, but I think what I would like to see is to ensure that these documents are presented to the task force, that they are reviewed in conjunction with whatever else they're doing to make that decision or recommendation.
So the documents you're referring to are the presentation that you gave and then the document right here that Commissioner Metcalf has submitted.
And there's a third document that Linda and I worked on, which was articulating roles and responsibilities.
Okay. Yeah, there's no reason we can't give those to the task force and ask that they take a look at them.
The only exception I'm going to make to that is when you and Linda put this out before, it was with the idea of bring it back to us so we can discuss it as a group and make a decision on what we want to take. Throwing the raw information from that or from this out there is premature. I don't think that's what we were about weeks ago when we said that.
And I do think that the process that we worked out can be very useful in the future moving forward. But, I mean, I'll take just the speech being handed to them.
So then should we at our next meeting review either at our next meeting review David's document and the roles and responsibility document, or do we just do this through email?
It's kind of hard to say because at the next meeting you'll have the election of the new chair and chair pro tem and the historical preservation liaison. We'll have the introduction of all the new commissioners, and I don't know how we're you guys are planning on getting them up to speed with this process.
Maybe it's a simple question. For those of us who are still going to be here at the next meeting, sorry, guys, is this something that we feel important to pursue? We felt that way weeks ago. That's why the two of you produced the roles and responsibilities in accordance with Matt's, what both of you said. We need to tell them what we think the breakdown ought to be. And my overview, trying to talk about not just relative responsibilities between staff, city council, and planning commission, but the whole comp plan approach. Whatever we want to talk about, we said we wanted to talk about it amongst ourselves and then decide what was important to elevate the council's attention. Are we still interested in doing that? And if we are, we need to get it on an agenda at the earliest opportunity.
Jenny?
I guess one of the things, and I like that collaboration is in the top, because I think that's going to be really key with the shorter time frame to work with council. And one of the things that I'm curious about, Glenn, is if there's going to be a stepping stone of, let's say that there's certain points in the process of producing the comp plan or doing the comp plan update where there's a draft and where there's a point where we're reviewing it, and then also we can sit down with city council and discuss it, and then what comes out of that, then that's modified, and then so there's points along the way that by the time we receive the final, city council receives the final, we know that we've worked through any comments, especially that city council may have. Is that there have been some thought of how that might happen, or if there's some check-in points to kind of sign off along the way to make sure that as we're moving forward, that you as the staff, you know, okay, this is set, we got it, we can move forward to the next step, we got that, and so I'm curious about the process.
Yeah, and if you remember at our last meeting, I think it was, and it was a work session, we gave you kind of a more detailed schedule that had those check-ins in there. But I think the concern was, again, getting back to if council wants to do this plan, they ought to do this plan. And for whatever reason, we can't get beyond that. So I'm getting a little concerned because we're getting close to that point where we do have to start moving forward on the comprehensive plan. I guess you didn't ask, but my opinion is that the commission is maybe jousting with a windmill a little bit here. I'm not sure that it's going to be as big a concern because it is going to be a progressive process. And I think it's going to be very different from the downtown neighborhood plan. So I don't think we should expect the same results.
Okay.
But whatever we can do to get beyond this, I'm all for it, and get on to providing a plan for this community.
Yeah, I do feel, I mean, I've seen this list, Dave, that you've handed out, and I've participated in developing the roles and responsibilities document that was presented last week. There are some issues here that I think we need to talk through. Right now, I feel like we are talking amongst ourselves here, and I'm not sure that it goes beyond that, and I think it needs to have an effective comp plan process. So I think at the next meeting, it may be the next couple meetings, we could take these and prioritize them. Obviously, there's a lot here. There's a lot to discuss, and it will take time to work through it, and some of them are probably more critical to that comp plan process than others. But I think we're all concerned about these issues, and to the extent that we can talk them through, have some agreement with staff, some agreement with council on is there an issue or not, I think that's important for us to move forward as a functioning group.
And as I said in the speech to City Council, I mean, we want to know if we have a role in this development of this plan, if it's significant or if it's meaningful. And right now, it appears to me that City Council does not want the Planning Commission to have a role. And if they don't want us to have a role, they need to tell us so that we can back away and so that we don't have to put all this work into the plan and get it done. I mean, it's a lot of work to do when we have no ability to impact the process. Any other comments?
I do. I guess I guess I'm trying to figure out what we need the council to say to us. Like, have they physically said that we're not responsible for doing the comp plan?
I think so. I mean, I think they've said to us, definitely, we don't want you guys to have the responsibility for the comp plan. And
I was asking Glenn that, and I guess that's a question directed to Glenn, because last time we spoke, I didn't think that wasn't the impression I got from you.
I've never heard that you don't have a role in the comprehensive plan.
You're still a recommending body. You're advisory, so you're going to have a very integral role.
And I think
It just allows council to approve or not approve or make recommendations
Which is same as
on
today,
the
right?
proposed plan. Excuse me?
Which is same as today.
You know what? If you got into the theoretical discussion, probably yes. The same as today.
Except that as of today, same as with the PDO, we are responsible for making the decision. For the comp plan, we are responsible for shaping, approving, and sending to City Council the comprehensive plan. City Council can accept it or reject it. What we went through with the town plan says their vision of that has evolved to saying they can do anything they want with it, which is probably true. The question Linda raises is, Planning Commission spent a lot of time over the last 4 years bringing what professionalism various members already brought to the table, to the discussion, to the investigation, to the determination of what the community wanted that fits together, what they wanted that was at odds, and how we'd find a way of making it work. So the question is still, where's that going to go? I find it odd. City Council has just appointed 3 people who are bringing additional skills, experience in the whole planning and zoning area. At the same time, they're talking about taking away the two of the major functions or responsibilities of Planning Commission, the PDOs, which has been a source of endless grief in this community for 6 years, and the comprehensive plan.
Well, all I'm saying, I guess, is I didn't see whatever meeting you saw, but Glenn's saying, no, they haven't said that. They're taking responsibility for the comp plan away.
we, as a planning commission, if there's some proposed ordinance changes, we no longer, I mean, the way that they would change the ordinance, or that I could envision it, is that we no longer would have responsibility. So therefore, we're not vested in the process of going out to the public. And in going out to the public, I cannot represent myself as a planning commissioner saying, your opinion counts, but city council is going to change whatever we do anyways. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. How can I listen to what somebody has to say, take it into consideration, think about it, and really have it make an impact into the comprehensive plan without having some kind of say in what we write? And I think I think it will be taken away, and therefore, what is our role based on that?
And Karina, that's why I tried to focus less on the specific roles, responsibilities, and more on referring to what I said earlier. It's the rules that are being followed or not followed that are more important to me than who's making the decisions. And this was an attempt to say, okay, what are the issues out there that need to be discussed openly, applied clearly, and imposed or enforced equitably? So that's what I was trying to do with this.
And so when you said we would still play an integral role, I think that's what is loose. We don't know what that role is. So regardless of what changes between, even considering the change between planning council's responsibility in the comp plan and city council, that what we were trying to also articulate are what are even the primary roles of city staff, et cetera. So it goes beyond the discussion of city council, and I think it comes back to even, Dave, what you're saying here is, what are the things we have to address as a organization overall, and just be transparent and upfront about it so that we know what role we are going to play, so we know where we can add value to the process. And I think that's the ambiguity that we're looking for, so that we're not going down one path with a lot of time, effort, and commitment that we can't influence.
I mean, look, my bet is nearly everyone on this commission has been a paid advisor consultant in a paid advisor or consultant role before. Okay, so we know how it works. We take the charge that we're given, we do ask the right questions, we find the right information to back it up, we present a reasoned, documented, fact-based advice or recommendation to the client. If they choose to ignore it or set aside parts of it, that's their call. If you do that repeatedly and are rejected, at some point you ask the question, no, you don't ask the question. You ask yourself, am I doing any good here? And you go to the client and say, I don't think this is working out for you or for us. We're going to terminate the relationship. On the other side of the coin, if the client doesn't like the advice they're getting, they're perfectly free to do the same thing. That's, I think all we're trying to do is get that clear, Glenn, and I don't see it right now.
Yeah.
I see talk of process. I see talk of elevating an advisory role, which is a pretty thin euphemism for taking away authority. I'd just like to know where we stand, whatever it is.
And I think it's only fair to the commission to know where we stand before we begin the process rather than afterwards.
And that's why the ordinance it's ready. And do we have an agenda date for that yet? It'll be heard at our next council meeting. So that certainly was heard, that you want to know. And I really don't see the overall role of the commissioners any different. I see the role of council different, and that is that they can make changes and modifications. But the way the process should work is that council is going to lean on you heavily, assuming that you're working within the more limited scope of your authority. So if it works well, you're making good recommendations, and they're relying on those recommendations.
So is that ordinance going to council, or is it going to the Planning Commission for review?
Council.
Okay,
So only to council, even though we've, never mind, go ahead.
So having asked council for more than 2 years to discuss with us what is wrong with the PDO process, what to do to improve the PDO process, and been rebuffed, and then handed this Thursday evening, the same thing is now going to happen with what happens with comprehensive planning.
And so now
no discussion with us, just...
So it sounds like we have a very small window to even begin to have our voice heard beyond what Linda presented. Is there really any harm for us to, share your document here, David, the document of roles and responsibilities, and forward it on to the task force now? Even if it's not 100% there, it's just to get them thinking.
Rather than wait until it's a done deal, and then they ask for our advice. Then you have no chance,
yeah. What do you guys think?
And
Update to council. Okay, so.
just a couple things that I've mentioned before, and this is in the protocols of standard and conduct by the city, and it talks about how the council and boards and city employee communications, and one of the main ones, and this is Section 5, is to improve open communication and the public policy decision-making process. It is a desire of council to ensure an evenness of communication between council boards and staff, as well as between council board members. This means all council boards members expect to receive information that is relevant to the council's policy-making authority and deliberations, as well as to the education and knowledge of individual members. So, and then also Section F says all boards shall be given sufficient and reasonable advance notice of a council meeting for which a board will be either the subject of an agenda item or are being requested to participate in the council meeting agenda, allowing for scheduling and participation. I'm just thinking that, these things are standards of conduct that they have for communications with boards, and I still think it's important to make sure that these are followed in our process. But that's just, and not knowing about the change in the ordinance, or not having to not necessarily go through Planning Commission, but to be communicated with Planning Commission for opportunities for input, it kind of makes me a little nervous.
But staff's saying if we want to have input, we can go to the unscheduled public appearances and throw our 2 cents worth in for 4 minutes.
So are we ready to move off to the proposed comp plan meeting times and locations?
What are we doing? What are we deciding then?
Just to follow up on this recommendation, I'd make a motion that we, I've had a chance to read through this, that we forward this to the task force, that it be considered as part of their discussion on the roles and responsibilities of Planning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved in.
Any discussion?
Any discussion, sorry.
No. Would also the roles and responsibility document that you put together be forwarded as well to the task force,
I think it already.
They have that document, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I forwarded it last Tuesday, so hopefully they got it Wednesday. So we have a motion to include that document and send it to the boards and commission task force.
I think as long as they understand that we didn't all have a great opportunity to review this and see what's in there, I'm sure.
Which is what I was looking for.
Yeah, I would rather see us wait and everyone review it and maybe make some comments, but if you want to move it forward, at least put a caveat in there that not everyone is reviewed and is 100% behind this as written.
As a friendly amendment, I would accept that. I think it's a matter of timing, and that's why I'm suggesting this.
And I understand that. We want to get there as soon as possible. So at least put a notice on there that this has not been fully discussed and reviewed by Planning Commission, although we feel it gets our points across in a short time frame that we have.
Jenny, do you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Put a caveat at the bottom, it's all his fault.
And it is all Matt's fault. Okay.
No, I meant, okay, never mind. Sorry, Matt. It just happened to be where I was pointing.
Get that for my wife all the time.
So the motion is to send this to the board and commission's task force with a notice that this has not been fully accepted and reviewed by the Planning Commission.
By the whole Planning Commission?
By the entire Planning Commission? Does that work for everybody? All right, all those in favor of that? That is unanimous. Any other discussion before we move on to?
By the way, thanks to Craig for reordering my priorities on that list.
And just in general, I am looking forward to moving forward with the comp plan and working on it. So certainly want to get down to business and keep moving it forward. But I think it will just bring an additional level of energy, I think, to that investment, that time investment, just knowing the reassurance, knowing that council is behind us, backing us, and behind us when we're providing our input that to weigh that from the professional standpoint and the objectivity that we want to bring to the process. So,
The right word.
Yeah, I think I certainly agree with that. All right, so that takes us to proposed comp plan, meeting times and location.
I might just kick it over to Kirsten to talk about boards and commissions training first.
Okay.
So we've scheduled May 9th for a mandatory training at 5:30. We will be, we've invited the general counsel for SOSA, Colorado Insurance Risk Agency. It's our self-insurance pool. The mayor, the city clerk, the city manager, and myself. We have, it'll be in the council chambers, and we'll be sending out a letter that notifies you of the time and place, and also a new boards and commissions handbook so that we can really start to understand what your role is, both in the advisory capacity and the quasi-judicial capacity. Tammy Tenoy, the general counsel of CIRSA, also did a training with City Council, and I think is just really very, very good because, you know, she comes from a perspective of, she's been in-house, she's been in private practice, she's worked for the Colorado Municipal League, and has a wealth of knowledge and can really step into the shoes and how, you know, in your view of the world, but also can address public official liability concerns and authority. She's familiar with she has a copy of our handbook, the one that you'll receive, the new one, and can be really prepared to address a lot of your questions. So some of the things that you are finding challenging about communicating with council and what your role is, I think those are all good questions, and I really encourage everybody to attend.
Question, Kirsten, will we be getting the handbook before that
Yes.
so that we can review it and have questions?
Yes, it's very close to being disseminated.
Next.
Okay, at our last study session, we talked a little bit about the comprehensive plan process, and we kind of described how there's going to be a series of meetings out in the community throughout the summer. We gave you a schedule of that here tonight. And what we, staff presented is what we'd like to do is take advantage of those meetings and have the next meeting after these to be on the comprehensive plan. What we heard was some negative comments from the Planning Commission that, one, that's kind of makes for a long day. That's basically these, what's affectionately being called pizza and fire truck meetings out in the community are going to start at 4:30 to 6:30. It's a drop-in at any time. Come and meet the staff, come and, you know, climb on a fire truck, whatever it be. We also are going to have a presence there just to get input on the comprehensive plan. But in talking to the staff and the folks with Mind Mixer, their concern is that if we don't have more of a comprehensive plan meeting on the same location to just carry forward that meeting, we're missing a golden opportunity. So I want to bring this back before you. I think the concern was that these, and again, if I'm misquoting what the concern was, I think the concern was that it's perhaps is a long day if you start at 4:30 and you stay to 8:30, but again, the first meeting is a drop-in. The second meeting can be a drop-in as well, so somebody doesn't have to be there. And then I think there was a concern that these are council district meetings, and should we break apart the comprehensive plan process from these, I guess you could construe them as being more of a political meeting. Maybe I've misinterpreted that.
I don't think that was our concern, Glenn. It was more a question of distribution. It wasn't so much it was per council district. It was having these meetings in a few areas of the city and not in other areas, making it a little more difficult to get the community-wide involvement.
Okay. Well, one solution I was going to add is we can have additional meetings as well, and perhaps this would address that concern. That we don't necessarily have to only stick to these, but I think we'd be missing an opportunity to get some valuable input. But we can have additional meetings as well to meet those. And you're thinking geographically, Dave, where perhaps we're not distributing out in the community, and we could certainly look at additional meetings for that.
And one of the other concerns was, as you said, that it made for a long day, but thinking now that the first section, the open house, is truly an open house, you just drop in, I would say those interested in participating in the comp plan perhaps dropping in later. So it's really, you know, optional for them to stay and how much of a commitment of time.
Sure. And if somebody is just interested in the comprehensive plan, then they come to the meeting at 6:30 to 8:30. And so I don't think we're cutting anybody out.
Do you have any thoughts around what the structure around the comp plan meeting would look like? Do you have any recommendations
at this point? We really are hoping to get input from the Planning Commission on that. I mean, we have some ideas.
If we knew our roles and responsibilities.
It's a vicious circle, I know. And just thinking ahead, we've got April 9th coming up. We would like to get to you some of the preliminary questions that we hope to put out to Mind Mixer. We've talked to them as well, and they would like to make a presentation to the Planning Commission when they're getting close to launching the website, the Inspire Littleton website. So we're looking to provide that presentation on April 23rd as well. So those are kind of two kind of key meetings for us and the Planning Commission.
Okay.
That's really all I have.
Glenn, do you have any idea when the Inspire Littleton site is going to be up and running?
We're projecting May 1. You can actually go on there now and register. If you go to inspirelittleton.org.
Then I must have screwed up because I did that Friday and couldn't find anything. Okay. I'll look
Well,
again.
it should allow you to at least register.
I was able to register.
Were you?
Yeah.
Good. It wouldn't allow me to register either, so.
Okay, now I don't feel so bad.
See, it's being selective already, so.
How are we going to, sorry, how are citizens going to be aware that this is up and running? You can now register, it's May 1st, vote.
Littleton report mentioned something.
That's where I got it.
That's what I responded to, and
That's what I thought, the Littleton report. And we may follow up with another, that's a good idea. We might just separately follow up with a press release or something.
All right, anything else from staff?
No.
Okay, HP board?
Okay, so I think as Glenn mentioned, they're going through code amendments as well for different things like inclusion of properties into the district, possible other districts and things like that. I think it's ongoing and too early to say. And their chair, a guy who's been there for 9 years, is going off, which is kind of a tragedy because he seems like he's really directed the board. But anyways, I mean, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Should we, commissioners, Matt, do you have anything else to report?
Nope, just that I think the folks that are leaving have done a great job, and I appreciate all of your work, and we'll miss you.
Thank you. Karina?
I second that.
Steve?
Well, I'm one of them leaving. 5 years ago when I got onto the Planning Commission, I got on for the reason of it appeared at that time that the Planning Commission and City Council didn't care too much what the citizens had to say. So I got onto the Planning Commission so I could make a difference in my community. With different changes that have come up recently with the council and some of the stuff forwarded to us by staff, I've come up with the conclusion that as a planning commissioner, I'm no longer able to make a big contribution to the community, so I had decided not to reapply. And with that being said, I have all the confidence in the city council, and I support most all of them with every ounce that I have. And I'd also like to thank staff for everything that you've done for me over the last 5 years. So thank you.
Okay.
And the other commissioners also.
Well, whether you think so or not, I think Steve, you and Linda and any of the other commissioners that may not be here next time we meet, you have had a tremendous positive impact on the community, and it's been a tremendous pleasure for me to have worked with you. So thank you very much.
Kurt?
I do. I think, Steve, we really appreciate all you've done, all your hard work, and Linda, countless hours that you've spent helping the commission. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
yeah, especially, Steve, with the extra perspective you brought on as one of the old hands carried over when the rest of us came on board.
You know, actually, Linda was the first planning commissioner I talked to before I was on the planning commission. So, and I thought it was encouraging talking with her, and further reinforced me to want to sign up and to interview for being a planning commissioner. So thank you.
And I'm really glad you did.
And thank you, Steve. And and Kurt, it's been good. It's been good. Thank you for all your service and your hours. There's just been a lot of time commitment, and thank you.
And now you get to listen to me pontificate for a few minutes. One of the concerns I've had is that we tend to lose the items we discussed that we decided to discuss in some of the meetings. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate a couple things that we talked about. And one was how do we measure height? And that's definitely an issue, and I think we talked about density to look at that a little bit further. We talked about having a parking lot at one point that we would review on a routine basis. And we also talked about having a quarterly status report on the implementation of the downtown plan. We also talked about getting an update from Michael Penny as to what's going on with the city council. And there's more. We've also talked about some debriefing on some cases that we've reviewed. For example, the McDonald's, the signs. What happened with the sign and why was it, what was some of the debriefing that we could get on some of the cases. One of the things I'm also concerned that we might lose is the vote from prior city councils or the affirmation from city council and the vote from the planning commission to look at the Santa Fe corridor in a timely manner. And then I think you also mentioned a review of what happened in the Walmart case, so that in context of land use and planning. And I know I'm missing quite a bit, but I think that we'll definitely do. Parking's definitely an issue. And planning commission workshops, I don't know if you're going to have one this year, but that's something we usually have in May. And I just want to say how important it is to resolve these issues with city council so that we can have a really smooth comp plan process and that we don't waste any time on, kind of this bickering back and forth. So we've got a process we can move forward and we can move forward energetically. So I think that's it. No, I really enjoyed working with everyone, and I'll definitely miss this, and then I can at least watch Dancing with the Stars on Monday nights.
And Monday Night Football.
And Monday Night Football, most important. So, any other comments? So we are actually 4 minutes early. Yeah, I think that's it. So do we
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, it's unanimous. Sorry for going on and on.